This week's sponsor of the Ortho Show podcast is KOHa Health. At KOHa Health, their goal is to empower your practice to achieve total financial health. Their team of revenue cycle experts is here to guide your practice to success by improving your financial process so you can collect all the cash you are owed, providing a great patient experience, and creating your plan for what comes next for you and your partners. To learn more, visit KOHaHealth.com. That's KOHA Health.com. Okay, this is a really cool episode. I have to say, we're bringing on Michael Freehill, an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, who is a former professional baseball pitcher for the California Angels and started off his career in San Diego. Knew he wanted to go into medicine, which was truly fascinating in college, but yet was still a Division I baseball pitcher, and then gets drafted and goes into the major leagues and basically has like 5 years where he's out of his medical career, but then decides to come back in and now has become a true force in sports medicine. He's out at Stanford with Seth Sherman and really a great faculty out there. And is also now a part of Major League Baseball, has an amazing biomechanics lab. He's really making a true difference in developing the science of what we should be doing to make our athletes better when it comes to baseball. It's a great episode. You're going to love it. Dr. Sigman, #follow the fro. Check out the YouTube channel too.
From Medical Media, this is The Ortho Show.
Hello, world. Dr. Scott Sigman, your favorite opioid-sparing orthopedic surgeon, here for another episode of the Ortho Show podcast, where everyone knows we bring the best of the best in orthopedics. We're super excited to have one of our country's top sports medicine and baseball specialists, in particular, Dr. Michael Freehill, who's an orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, shoulder specialist at Stanford, where he's the head team physician for the baseball team, as well as taking care of all the athletic teams out there, also on the medical staff for the Oakland Athletics, deeply involved in Major League Baseball. Michael, it is a pleasure to see you. Thank you for taking some time out on the West Coast.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me. Great honor.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. So first and foremost, Stanford baseball. How you guys doing? You in the World Series? You getting there? What's happening?
Yeah, it's exciting. They won last night in their regional against Texas A&M. So now they go to the Super Regionals, which is here at Stanford as well. That Texas Longhorns come to town, and if they win that, then they'd go to the College World Series again for the third year in a row.
Oh, man, that's fantastic. It's all because of the outstanding medical care that they're being provided by Dr. Freehill and staff.
I don't know about that, but
no, that's awesome. Good to be involved. No, I love it. So let's tell your story. In particular, we always like to start at the beginning. Where were you born? Was it destined for orthopedics? Are there doctors in the family? You're the first doctor. Where did this whole thing start?
No, I was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and I don't know where I kind of got the bug, somewhere right around starting college, but I ended up graduating from University of San Diego, and I played baseball there. It was kind of interesting though, when I was there, I realized that I went there as a position player, so I realized quickly that the hitters were a lot better, or I wasn't as good of a hitter, or I wasn't as good of a hitter as the coaches thought I was when I got there, and trying to stay up half the night and make sure I got good enough grades to get into medical school was very difficult. So ultimately I got converted to a pitcher, which was kind of divine intervention, if you will, because I just had some natural skill, and was drafted, after my senior year, which, you kind of know that's coming a little bit, earlier on in your senior year. So you plan for that. So given the opportunity of it, I wasn't going to say no to that. That's like every kid's dream, I think, at least if you're a baseball player. So I went and did that, planning to do it for a year or maybe two, and then it ended up being 7. So
all right, so let's get this straight. So you're at UCSD. You're clearly,
US.
I'm sorry, USD. I apologize. You're USD. My apologies. And you're there. Were you? And so you're playing baseball. You knew baseball was a passion. You were there obviously to as a scholarship athlete, I'm assuming. And I mean, was medicine a part of the track at that point, or were you just sort of like, I'm not
When I
sure?
was at USD, the irony to it is that I was much more geared towards getting into medical school than I was about, you know, playing baseball. And then but this pitching thing started to really come to fruition a bit, and I just had started having some success. It didn't change the fact that my ultimate dream was to go to medical school, but all of a sudden now, that changed my thought of, hey, it would be cool to say I played professional baseball, if only for a year or two. So that's why I did it, or I was fortunate enough to do it. I got drafted by, they were the California Angels then, and that was a pretty wild experience.
All right. So how tall are you?
6'3", 6'3 and a half.
6'3". All right, that's pretty tall in the baseball world, especially for pitching, which does make a difference for arm speed, velocity. What, you're right-hander or left-hander?
Right-handed, unfortunately.
Right-handed. And so, I mean, when did they? I mean, you think, you hear these stories about, starting so early in life, and you got to work your way up. And I mean, so just one day somebody threw you on the mound and you
Well,
started
I mean,
throwing?
I had pitched in like little league and things like that, and I was always really good. But then when in high school, I really wanted to be a position player. I mean, I was a shortstop, um, and I think I was pretty good. I wasn't, probably looking back, probably an adequate hitter, but I was good enough to end up at a Division I program. But so I always kind of had the really good arm. So again, this is kind of the divine intervention part of it. When you're at a school like USD, and where did you go to undergrad?
I went to Tufts undergrad. I played lacrosse
Okay,
back on
yeah,
the East Coast. Yeah.
yeah. So tough, same. They're great schools, but they're not real big. So it's like if you're in, have organic chemistry lab, it's not like there's six choices. The
Correct.
labs for the chemistry stuff were on Thursday afternoon. End of story.
Right.
There's no other time. Now, fortunately, that's not a game day, but that is a practice day. And, and again, my goal was to get into medical school. So it's an interesting conversation with the coaches. It's like, I have to be at these labs. It's hard to be a position player when you're there. And then, putting all these pieces together, they're like, you know what? They put me in the bullpen. They said, you got to have a great arm. You have natural ability. This would make life, you'd be happier. It'd be better for us. You throw, do your throwing, do your running, and then run off the lab with all the other, brainy kids, and the rest of the team will practice down here.
I think that's amazing because there are not a lot of professional baseball players that had aspirations of becoming a physician. It's just those two things don't typically go together. And no disrespect to professional baseball players, but it is pretty rare. So interesting. So you do well enough. I mean, obviously you get drafted by the Angels.
Yeah.
And then you were on the roster? Were you the Major League
Yeah,
Baseball
so
roster?
it's interesting because the Angels, and I don't know how much of these details you want, but I find them kind of interesting.
Yeah.
The Gene Autry family owned the Angels for a long time, and when I got drafted, and they were, the California Angels, Autry family owned them. Much different. The philosophy was very interesting. They were much heavier on drafting college kids, and they would throw you into the fire. Most of the draft guys were going to Boise, Idaho, to the Northwest League, which is short season A, and they would drop all these college guys into there, and they sold out every night. They expected you to win the championship, and it didn't matter where you came from. It was just like trial by fire, and you kind of sank or swam. Yeah, so the washout in that first year is pretty heavy. And then you go to spring training the next year, and it's interesting, Scott, because I don't know if the fact that I was more serious, not, I don't want to say serious, but more, like the passion and the goal of going to medical school and just treating, not putting too much pressure on myself in a sport to make it seem like, that's all I had. And if I didn't make it, and I don't know if that's why I had so much success early, but I very well may have, because I did, really well that second year. And, in pro ball, they teach you. I mean, they told me right away, they said, you have pretty good stuff right now. And you really don't know how to pitch very well. We're gonna build up your body and teach you mechanically how to do these things. On a side note, right when I was drafted, you might find this interesting. Louis Yoakum, you remember Dr.
Yeah.
Yoakum, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So he's the Angels team doctor. So very first day, we get drafted. All the draft guys go to Tempe to get our physical exams, and by this time, I knew I was interested in, medical school and likely orthopedic surgery. And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing! You're doing what I want to do." And he's looking at me like,
What is going on
"Yeah,
here?
there's no chance." I mean, never. But every year I would talk to him. But it's funny because he said you have a loose arm, and that's probably why you can do what you can do. But you got to really be careful. And at that time, no one was talking about scapular dyskinesia and
Yeah.
GERD and
No.
crazy things.
I
Uh,
did my fellowship at Curling Job, and so Lou
oh, so
Yoakum was one of my mentors, and we helped
yeah.
take care for I was there in 95, 96. We would drive down to Anaheim and help out to take care of the team. But I think the pitching this is what I want to sort of get to. I mean, it's such an unnatural thing. I always joke around about the shoulder, right? The greatest thing about the shoulder is its range of motion. The worst thing about the shoulder is its range of motion. And if you truly watch the mechanics and the video of the position of the arm that Major League Baseball players and pitchers put their arm in, it's just crazy. And so the idea of the Nolan Ryans of the world that can go for 20 years and be able to continue to pitch is such a rare experience. And I want to talk about what you do in the science of baseball as we get going, but it seems to me like it sounds to me like your arm burned out. You had some trouble with your shoulder. You needed some surgery.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, well, again, I did well that second full season. I think I still have a saves record in Cedar Rapids for the Colonels, and they've
Okay.
had minor league baseball there since 1915. But
I love
anyway,
it.
I think that might be true. But yeah, but if then all of a sudden, you that kind of jumped me up to more of a prospect level, and then they say, okay, go to winter ball. So the next thing you know, I'm at in well, it was nice that year. I was in Hawaii, but it's 2 more months, and you're
A
with all
lot of throwing. That's a lot of
prospects,
pitching, a lot of
a
reps.
lot of pitching, and then but I did really well. Get home in mid-December, and then Bill Bavasi was the GM for the major league team. He called me. He said, "We want to bring you to major league camp as a non-roster guy," and that
Wow.
fast. I was only a year and a half in, and that starts in mid-February. So now, you don't have a lot of time to rest your arm and build your body back up. So then you're at big league camp, then you go to minor league camp, then you're off to pitch your season, and I think, I led the minors, our organization, in appearances that year. And then same thing, now it's your protection year, and they say, well, we want you to go pitch in Mexico.
Oh God.
And then you're like, well, if my arm's starting to hurt, if I say no, then it kind of makes you look weak. And they might not put you on the 40-man roster, or you go. So you go there, then they put me on the 40-man roster. My arm starts getting tired. I come back. I'm back at major league spring training, go off to the season, led the minor leagues again. Didn't have such a great year, but now you're like, they say, well, we want you to go to Arizona Fall League. Well, same thing. Now it's like, well, if I say no, do I get taken off the roster? So this is the violent circle, Scott. But then I
Yeah.
ended up getting shut down there. And then, I just couldn't bounce back for spring training. And ultimately, we tried the non-op stuff, and then, in this was 1998. The joke is, this was the hot thing at the time, but
Oh yeah.
Dr. Yoakum, and he's like, this is what people are doing. I mean, this would give you a shot just doing the thermal capsulorrhaphy. I didn't know as much about it then as I know now, but the bottom line was we exhausted the conservative stuff. Um, and it was an interesting phenomenon, right? Because I think it's better. It's good now. At the time, it was very difficult, but it's good now because when you're on the other side and you've had, let's say in this case, a shoulder surgery, and you kind of feel those ups and downs and feel like every single, tweak. Oh my, something's wrong. I feel a little tweak in my shoulder in this post-op period, or it's just there's so much mental side of that. Having gone through that, I think the discussions with taking care of players, especially baseball players, is a little more natural. And I think they trust it a bit, having gone through it. But I came back and ended up getting released when I couldn't come back. But once you're on a 40-man, because pitching's at such a premium, you have some value, even if you can't throw the ball across the street. But I ended up with Texas, and it was good because I wanted to put closure on it, the Rangers, and got back up to AAA. But I'll tell you, Scott, it was interesting because I went from a point where I couldn't throw at all to a point where I could throw, but it was never the same. Like just the electricity, it was gone. It's kind of like a dull light bulb versus like a
The
laser beam.
pop. Yeah, of
And
course.
bouncing back was very difficult. So even though I got back up to AAA, the last season playing, it was amazing. I was out there on the mound, and it was more of a game of trying to fool guys. It certainly wasn't. It was interesting, and it was. I knew it
Yeah.
was going to happen, but I retired and on my own accord, may I add, not to say that, but we won't go into the details. But I did go and play in Europe just leading up to med school. But that last year, I had to retake my MCAT. It expired after 5 years.
Oh man.
So before my last season, I'm at home and I'm doing my extra workouts and throwing and studying for the MCAT. And if you haven't had physics in 8 years, it's not so easy.
No,
And
no,
I'm at
no,
spring
no.
training, like looking at MCAT books and stuff. This is before everyone had laptops. And then I took that. And then, but I, when I was in AAA, all those cities were, have med schools. And I mean, they're basically like big league cities. And I would go to the different cities and go to the med school during the day and introduce myself and say, my application's coming. This is my story. And more places than not were interested in the story. So it probably gave me a little bit of a benefit, I like to think. Um, and I ended up at Tulane.
Yeah, no, that's a remarkable story. I mean, and for our listeners, you had this crazy operation, back in 1998, 99 called thermal capsulorrhaphy, where we would take this heat wand, and I'm 3 years into practice at that point. I just finished my curling joke fellowship. And you take this heat wand and you would shrink the capsule because it was too loose and you wanted to try and tighten the shoulder up. And it seemed like a decent idea, except for the fact that as a general rule, these types of heat things kill cells and then create all kinds of trauma. And it got overused, and then there was a lot of injuries. And then we kind of figured out that it wasn't the best long-term solution. But I think it's fascinating that you were still able to get back with the mound. But then I think, first and foremost, I just think of Lou Yoakum right now, God rest his soul. And here, you could have like sort of called Lou when this is all said and done, and you get into medical school, and you're like, I told you I was going to medical school, Dr.
Oh,
Yoakum.
well, it was
Yeah.
awesome. I mean, he became a mentor, especially once I started med school, with where I would rotate for my fourth year rotations and him guiding me. And I mean, he became a great mentor in that. But the thing about that whole experience, on a side note, you might like this, and that I think Michael Maloney was the fellow that was in on my case.
Oh, no kidding.
We're pretty sure. And his younger brother, I played pro ball with, who got
Oh,
to the
that's
big league.
So there you go. So the baseball, keeping the baseball circle in. And as a
Yeah.
candidate for medical school, if you think about all the applications that come through, everybody's more or less the same, right? Everybody's got good grades. They've done their research, but you're like, no, I was a professional baseball player. I'm kind of cool. So yeah, that type of thing I'm sure helps. So then you go to Tulane. And the first two names that pop up into my brain, although I'm not sure if Mike O'Brien was there, and
Michael
even was
Bryan was a fourth year med student when I was a first year med student.
okay, perfect. I love that. And so had Buddy made it from Mississippi over
Buddy
to Tulane
hadn't
yet?
got there yet because he came after Katrina.
After Katrina,
I
exactly.
graduated 3 months before Katrina hit.
Got it. Okay. So these so I love the fact that you and Michael are contemporaries and
Oh, yeah.
having spent some time. So at Tulane, you decide, or you knew you were doing orthopedics. That was never
Yeah.
it was never an issue. And then you get to Hopkins for residency. And I grew up in Baltimore, so I know that drill. I
Okay.
actually went to University of Maryland for medical school. I was there, I don't know, in the early 90s or something like that. But Hopkins is just a wonderful,
Yeah.
medical school training ground, et cetera. Do you want to throw out some shout outs to some of your orthopedic docs that sort of helped you along the way?
Well, yeah. I mean, I just gave grand rounds there recently, so it's pretty awesome. But yeah, I mean, I had some tremendous mentors there. I mean that uh, Ed McFarland, kind of he was a old, KJ guy as well, and I think he probably Lou Yoakum wrote a letter, one of my letters that I probably my application probably got in front of the right eyes at the right time. There's a lot of luck involved in all this. But Dr. John Wilkins, I don't know if you know him. He took care of Navy for a long time, took care of the Orioles, Andy Kazgaria. There are a lot of them in all these different fields that were just great mentors, and certainly were highly responsible for getting me on my way.
And you knew it was going to be, you were going to do sports, right? I mean, that was your destiny all along,
It
or?
was, but it's interesting, Scott, because I wanted to take care of athletes, especially baseball athletes, but I wanted to take care of athletes, but I was like fascinated by the shoulder thing. So I wanted to be like able to do anything in the shoulder. So when I started looking at this, I thought to myself, I think I need to do 2 fellowships to really be able to do kind of branch off into some of the shoulder stuff I wanted to.
Well, you were only 7 years behind at that point, having spent all that time playing baseball.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody else has sort of already got their
What's
jobs.
another year?
Right, exactly. All right, so you did sports medicine. You went to Stanford,
Yeah,
which was
worked
great.
out well because Mark Safran was here, and again, talking to my mentors. Stanford was unique in the fact that they had some pro teams. They have obviously Stanford sports. So we had all, I mean, we just covered the gamut with what you get. So like coming here was perfect to learn how to take care of athletes, right? To
Sure.
take and I'm not just talking about surgeries because they change all the time, but how do you deal with coaches? How do you deal with parents? How do you deal with athletic trainers? There's a lot of fabric there that it's easy to take advantage of. Probably the best part for all of us and the easiest part for all of us is doing the surgery. It's all kind of a
Absolutely.
social aspect that integrates into that world.
Yeah,
And
no, and that's a great point. I mean, Curlin Joe, the Harvard program, Jim Andrews. I mean, HSS. There were certain places that you exactly that. You learned how to manage teams, how to manage athletes, and be able to take care of them on the field as well as off the field, which I think was terrific. But then, you still really wanted to know more about the shoulder, and you
yeah,
wanted to take a deep dive on the shoulder. So you come to Boston 2012 and you join the Harvard Shoulder Service with, I'm sure, JP was there leading. Larry Higgins was at the Brigham at the time.
yeah,
I mean, it was really one of the top shoulder fellowships in the country.
it was amazing. And then, and part of that was, the built-in European experience. So I did a month in Lyon with Jules Walsh and a month in Annecy with Laurent Lafosse.
Yeah,
Great
great
month.
stuff.
I mean, that's insane,
Yeah,
right?
no, great. Yeah, you're learning from the best for sure.
And
The
then
French royalty.
my co-fellows that year were Albert Lin
Yep.
at Pitt, who's a total rock star.
We got to get Al on the show.
Yeah.
He's due up for sure.
And then Lewis Sheed, Lewis at University of Chicago.
No, I don't know Lewis.
He did Harvard, his training all the way through. Very, really smart publishing machine. Very.
Those Harvard guys are all the ones that go all the way through, man. They just they just know the literature. They know it all great.
And then there was the 6 month fellow, that because there's a 6 month fellow when the other three go to Europe, was Arnold Alceza, who's still in the area doing
Sure.
residence and does a lot of hand, but crosses over into the shoulder.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It
What a
really
great year.
class.
Were there any, but you did, I know it wasn't part of the sports side, but did you help cover games as well while you were there, or no? The pro teams?
No, I didn't. I mean, I
Yeah.
knew that
Okay.
was coming, so I didn't while I was there.
Yeah, no, I know, because there's always a crossover with the sports fellowship there too, which those guys did most of the coverage. So, all right, so at this point you're pretty prepared, man. You know a lot of this baseball stuff. You've been trained as an orthopedic surgeon. You know what to do with sports medicine. Now you're really great in the shoulder, and off to Wake Forest to sort of start, or become the director of sports medicine right from the get-go. Was that the job?
From the get-go. I wasn't the
Okay.
director. This goes back to being right place at the right time. David Martin, who's now the executive director of the ABOS. He was the head of sports ortho for a long time at Wake and took care of all the teams. But he was an old Hopkins resident, so he knew some of the people at Hopkins that
Sure.
knew me. And then when I would help John Wilkins cover a Navy football game, they were playing Wake, and he put me on the other sideline with David Martin.
Oh, nice. Nice. I
So
love
it's
it.
just right place at the right time. But that was a great place to start. I mean, I took care of the minor league team, the Winston-Salem Dash right away, White Sox affiliate. So that was great. And then Wake Forest baseball, Dr. Martin gave me that right out of the chute. And then I would help with the other sports. It's interesting, but Wake was kind of the crown jewel, if you will. But there was another Division II school in town called Winston-Salem State, which is an all African American school. And I'll tell you, it was amazing because for the first 4 years, that's what I covered: football and basketball, and it was fantastic. So often we want to get, you want to take care of the Red Sox, but taking care of the minor league team in Lowell probably will give you the foundation to get there. And I was lucky because I had the minor league team and I had Wake baseball. But I'll tell you, taking care of Winston-Salem State, all those kids were awesome, and they were very thankful that you would come around and you'd be there. It was an awesome experience, and I think that gave me a pretty decent, foundation as well early on.
Yeah, I mean, the days of nepotism and jumping into a job just because, somebody just says you should do it, you need a pedigree. You need to have a track record. Life is all about relationships. I love how, you're on the field, taking care of Navy, and then you go over to meet the people at Wake Forest. That wasn't by accident. It's the relationships that you make, which you still hold to this day. And then the pedigree of sort of learning and working your way up through the system to be able to get to the point where you become a part of the major leagues. It's just like being a player, right? You got to work your way, up through the process. And so it was great foundational years for you in Wake Forest, it sounds, which really helped to build your practice.
Is, we had that baseball experience, and I was very interested in what Jimmy Andrews and Glenn Fleisig had done, and they changed baseball science, quite frankly, right? They were the groundbreakers, and I wanted to be able to do that, like build on what they had done, and wanted to build some kind of center, some kind of place that we could really take off. And I was pretty close with the head coach there, Tom Walter, who, I mean, they're ranked number one in the nation. He's just done a phenomenal job, and is like the best human being you can meet. But we had talked about building this pitching lab there, and to their credit, that it's there, and it's kind of one of the first of its kind to that degree. So at this point, you have to start. I wanted to keep chiseling up, and I did want to be involved with a Major League Baseball team if at all possible. And I wanted to keep expanding my career. In the academic game, you want to keep kind of chipping your way up. The goal was to get back to Stanford, quite frankly, from the start.
You spent a little bit of time in Michigan on the way.
Yeah. So then when I started getting recruited by some other places, the job wasn't quite a perfect fit at Stanford, but there was certainly some resources from, let's say, an academic standpoint that I could get at Michigan. It was a great Ann Arbor is a great place to raise a family. I knew Steve Lemos from Pryor, who has taken care of the teams in Detroit for a long time and has had the Tigers for like 15 years and had recruited me in the past to join them. So we had a relationship, so I could be at Michigan with Michigan sports. We had Eastern Michigan sports, and then Dr. Lemos brought me on to be one of the Tigers doctors. So that's kind of hard to say no to.
Sure.
When you put all those pieces together. And, it was hard to leave Wake because there's comfort there and the baseball situation. But you got to keep crawling and keep growing. And it was hard, but it was good. And it was exciting. And we're like, okay, this is a good place, and this is where we'll stay. We're only going to move for Stanford. And then that kind of came to fruition. So
how long were you in Michigan before you got the call to go to Stanford?
3 years.
Yeah. But, I find it fascinating because, very early on in your career, you were able to really sort of stay the path of what you really wanted to do and stay focused. And again, I liken it almost to being, in the world of baseball. You start at the minors, and then, you just work your way up. And as you gain experience, and your reputation grows, and then you work your way up, and so then you get the call to the big leagues for you, which was to head back to Stanford to be able to take on the position there, and I'm assuming that you were offered team position for the baseball team as part of the deal as you were coming on board.
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing because Mark Safran has always been a great mentor, and he brought Seth Sherman back, and I mean, he's really built I think a pretty cool team, and we all get along really well. So he brought me back, and he gave me the baseball, which was awesome. I had the A's situation set up because I don't know if you know Will Workman, great guy. He's taken care of the A's for probably 11 or 12 years, and I could go right in and be his assistant, which was fantastic. We could build a baseball, we call it the baseball science core. And, Bill Maloney's our chairman here, who's an incredible leader. And I spoke to him about, doing this kind of baseball science core and, this vision. And, he believed in it. So he let me hire someone to do the sports biomechanics, the baseball biomechanics for us, which is huge, Scott, because if you want to do that stuff, you have to have your Glenn Fleissig or it's not going to go.
Yeah, no, I mean that's where I wanted to go next, because I think that what you're doing now. I take a look back at thermal, all the way from thermal capsulorrhaphy to you as a patient to at Curlin Jove we had the biomechanics lab as well. We were very fortunate, very early on in the process to be a part of that. I did some research with the team there, but that type of the science behind this is so important because baseball puts a lot of stress and strain onto our young kids and our athletes, and being able to help out to understand it. The thing that I'm thinking about right now is artificial intelligence and somehow incorporating AI, get all of the video from all of the greatest, pitchers and throw it into the computer, and then come out with some ideas and concepts and perhaps the best, a throwing mechanism that could be out there. But tell us more about the core lab and what you're doing there. I know you're very proud of that, and how that's helping to really make a difference in the lives of young baseball athletes.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's kind of like we get stuck in a little bit of tunnel vision, and I'm certainly guilty of this. So, my thought when I came was, okay, I've been cleared to let's hire this person. And a lot of people applied for this, and a guy named Bryson Nakamura, who's pretty well known in the biomechanic baseball world. He was with the Milwaukee Brewers, kind of heading up their baseball biomechanics, and how well they had done for years, being the smallest market team in the big leagues. And I was fortunate because he was interested in kind of pursuing a different route and maybe going the academic route a little bit and kind of building something grassroots. So he came, and it's interesting because of his experiences. My thought was, okay, we're going to build this, we're going to build this lab, this pitching lab. This structure, and it's going to have cameras. But it was kind of like the tunnel vision, where when he came, he kind of changed my. He said, let's do this. He said, because you have to build it by pieces. You're very rarely going to be a situation where it's just like, here's, unlimited funding and buy whatever you want and do whatever you want. You have to build this. He said, a lot of people have some kind of lab now, and they're just doing the videos and everything. He said, let's flip it. He said, let's flip it where they're not in a practice mode. Let's make the lab the sunken diamond, the actual game stadium. So a lot of people have TrackMan. We had TrackMan, but we were the first to have Kinetrax cameras, all over the stadium. So every single pitch that's being thrown, we're getting biomechanical data on. And he said, let's do that, because in-game data is what no one has and what is so valuable. And then later we'll pick back up on the lab practice stuff, which I thought was genius, right?
No, remarkable. I mean,
where we are, but it moves slow. It's a slow moving train, Scott. I mean, it's a different thing in the big leagues in a pro setting than it is at a major university institution. There's red tape. Things move slow. You just have to slowly chip away and be patient. And none of us really are.
I mean, I love. I mean, I think of the that technology is used by the coaching staff, right, to be able to analyze where's
Yeah.
the shot, where's the ball going, position people over in here. In basketball, for example, as well. But the idea of actually taking those cameras now and using it to watch and be able to improve on the biomechanics to keep people healthy, perhaps have longevity, I think is wonderful. I think that's a really cool idea, very unique.
No, it's cool. And again, it gets back to, even though I know a little bit about pitching, I would think, and a little bit about biomechanics. I don't know nearly what somebody who's a PhD in biomechanics knows. So I think a lot of times, if you look in orthopedic literature, and I'm sure, I mean, you see this at meetings, a lot of this data comes spewing out, and in sports science, all this data, and it's like, well, what does this data mean? You have all the data in the world, but if you don't have someone that knows how to define it, how do you
Yeah.
take the data and objectively make a change? That might be mechanics, that might be whatever, sports performance. Um, so having that is key, and you can build research on that and everything else.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what a great program. Great. It's so funny, Seth Sherman. I just commented on Greg DeFelice's ACL repair. He was talking about the Sherman classification of ACLs, which I'm sure it was Seth's father that came up
Yeah.
with that classification. So, I mean, I'm always so proud of our Ortho Show alumni. I always like to give them shout outs where we can. But what are your other things, which I know that you spend a lot of time on, which is a very popular, commentary, which I'd love for our listeners to know, is get a sense from you, is pitch counts in adolescence, right? That's one of the things that coaches and parents are always so worried about. And can you just give us a brief description of where you think we are right there now, as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, I've done a lot with that, and I have some, stuff that's going to get published here pretty quick on all that. This again, Scott, I went backwards and really tried to drill down at a more fundamental level. I think it's too easy. It's so easy to want to solve that quickly, and I just don't. I think there's so many variables to that. I think that pitch counts as they stand are they're nice for younger kids because there's some kind of framework. I don't think there's a lot of science there yet, like strong science. We published a paper, MLB funded a study of mine, and we took one travel team. This just got published in OJSM, but we got every single throw a kid made. I had it wasn't like a modus, it was like a sensor with the engineers at University of Michigan. We had it up under their sleeve, up in a cut down Evo shield up high, so they could wear it at all times. There was nothing illegal, but we could record every single every throw they made, and then we had we knew the days they pitched, and we had pitch charts and everything else. The bottom line was like, how much throwing does somebody do on a day that they pitch? And for that 10, 11-year-old team, on a day they pitched, the number of pitches that were counted towards their total throw count was 21%.
Really?
Yeah. That makes you think. It's like, okay, and then you're looking at their pitch count. Okay, by the the rules that are accepted, their pitch count is what, 75 pitches? And that's only 21% of so
All the throws that they made on that given day.
right. So that's the point. And to give a shout out to like Harold Reynolds, who's on Major League Baseball Network, and great. When I came across his path, he was very interested in this because I think it's more of a throw count issue than a pitch count issue. And and obviously some players are at higher risk than others. So and the other thing with the pitch count is maybe it's different now than it was, and I'll give John Smoltz the credit on this one too. He's a big believer in, you don't have to throw it as hard as you can every single time. But we're kind of in a day and age now where that almost seems to be the case. It's like the harder you can throw, the better you can throw. But do you need to throw your full velocity every time, or can you mix up your speeds of your fastball? And then when you have to have your greatest intensity or highest leverage fastball, you can call on it. How much toll does that take? I don't know. So I think it's a work in progress. Also, if you're a 14-year-old kid who matured early and weighs 170 pounds, should your pitch count be the same as the kid who's going to mature late and weighs 130 pounds? I probably not.
Really fascinating things. One thing's for sure, I feel really good because we have Michael Freehill on the case for all of these important questions. You built yourself amazing sort of biomechanical lab. You're partnering with the right people. You're fascinated on the process of this. You're going to help us to figure it out. We're going to keep listening. We're going to keep watching. But Michael, this is exactly why I love, the Ortho Show, because we get to talk to people that have just such unique, incredible stories. Here you were, a Major League Baseball player hanging out with Lou Yoakum, and then next thing you know, here you are taking care of amazing athletes within the baseball world, as well as all your sports medicine work, all the hard research and literature and the teaching and the mentorship that you do at this point, memberships of societies. So what a wonderful career, and you've got so much more to go. And we really can't thank you enough for all that you've done in the world of baseball and orthopedics and for taking out the time to share with us today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Scott. It's a great honor. I think that we'll probably fast forward a year or two down the road. I have some interesting stuff coming that you will love. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I do think it's going to be revolutionary from both an injury standpoint as well as a sports performance standpoint.
Well, we're going to bring you back on the show, brother, for another round so you can educate our listeners on what I think is really just an incredibly important topic. So, Michael, thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We appreciate you so much.
All right. Thanks so much. Great honor. A great show. Thanks, Scott.
This is Dr. Scott Sigman, #FollowTheFro, host of The Ortho Show. Till next time.